life and confidence coach Dianna Leeder, and this is my podcast, the Crave More Life Roadshow. It's here we talk about emotional hits and lovingly kicking our own asses to get through them. Just so you know, it always comes down to being your beautiful, sassy self, living and loving from you, no matter what. So join me to hear about the healing journeys of other women, and you just might become a DIY ass kicker too. Hey listeners, welcome back to the Roadshow. You're listening to the Man of the Men's Book series with author Guy Kilchirst. You'll find Guy's full bio in the show notes. So welcome to the Roadshow, Guy.
Well, Diana, it's good to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I loved your chapter, of course, and we're not sure whether or not the book has published yet when people see this later or hear it later, but at this point it isn't, so other people haven't seen it, but I've seen it. It is amazing. So thank you for that. So I want to ask you about your role as an artist, because that has, that's popped up in a couple of different ways through this project. First, because you were kind enough to allow us to use your image on the front cover, which is amazing. I wish that I had something here that I could pop up and show for the Facebook listeners today. But that's not the only place that it popped up, right? So there, in your chapter as well, you've done some creative things in your chapter relative to poetry, which we'll get to in a little bit. But maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself as an artist and your artistic expression.
Well, first I'll have to say that having one of my my art images selected as the book cover was a bit of a surprise and an honor. I think mostly because I try not to judge my own art as being good or not good, and so it's always interesting to experience what others think of it, what they relate to or don't relate to. It's really a creative input on my part as a human being and as a person who likes to use words to express himself and the visual imagery as well, and then bring those two together. That's it's kind of what I'm exploring right now artistically, is the bridging of the literary side, the words, and the visual images, and so that's my fun play. But as far as an artist, I give my parents a lot of credit. They were very creative people. It's not what they did for a living. They worked. They did trades. My mother was a beautician as a trade craft, and my dad was a mechanic and ultimately went into management. But they didn't really teach us that. They didn't sit down and say, okay, I want to teach you how to do art. I want to teach you how to fix things. It's how they carried their life. And we just picked it up as kids. And interestingly, my 5 siblings, we all have this artistic, creative bent in our personality and lifestyle. And it's kind of interesting, all very different in how we express that. But I attribute a lot of that to my parents. So that's where that comes from. And now being retired from employment and a lot of organizational duties, that's where I spend a lot of my time and my energy. And a lot of my art is more of a personal exploration, a discovery. And, I'm learning a little bit of techniques. I go to university and I take an art class. I'm learning fundamentals there, which is something I never did. And even in that venue, I get to engage with some young kids these days, which is kind of interesting. And I really enjoy that. So that's pretty good synopsis of my art journey. It's just another language. It's how I express myself personally in my inner journey. A lot of my art, you can see that, I think, but so a lot of that's there. So, but thank you for asking.
Well, you know what, Guy, the part of the reason why we really loved your image that we chose for the front cover was because it was so expressive. It's and again, people haven't seen this, so you're just going to have to hang on for a little bit more until you can. But it is a, a man in his shadow. So it's so like it just kind of jumped off the page for me, because that really is the core of so much of what we're reading in the book, including yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. So, tell us what brought about your transcendence. I mean, as I know that can be a very long story, so we won't ask you to go into all the detail yet. But yeah, I mean, we all kind of reach a place where we need to grow. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
One of the interesting experiences in working with the other guys in book project, we all had a comment or two about the word transcendent. It's kind of like we know it's a word out there, and we know what the definition is, but it's like we never attached it to ourselves or to our own journey. And I was no different in that way. So one of the things, which I do this quite often about words, is I first start and say, okay, what is that word? What's the etymology? What's the origin of that word? And it's so I did that, and of course, it's got basically two phraseologies. But then I went to Webster's dictionary, and I said, okay, what is transcendent? What does Webster say transcendence is? And of course, their definition in short was to climb over. And I thought about that for a while. In fact, I'm still thinking about the word. That's one of the beauties of the project. You pick up a word and you go, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to the world? What does it mean to Webster? And then again, what does it mean to me? What's my definition of that word? And I thought about it for a while and I said, yeah, I can kind of make sense out of that word climbing over. It's we go through in our life, all of us, men and women, young and old, we have experiences in our lives. Sometimes it's choices we make, or maybe it's just time to grow. When you're these different stages of life, from childhood to adolescence to young adulthood to middle age and to elder, there's always this movement. We have this movement that happens to us in life, and we don't want to stay there. When I'll be 65 years old in July, and well, I don't want the maturity. I want to grow from a childhood maturity or adolescent maturity or young adulthood. There's a stage in life. So I think about it, and it's the word to climb over is a good word. When I think about, okay, to move beyond. Sometimes just a natural progression through life requires us to do that, and at the same time it requires us, but it's still a choice. We can choose to live in our childhood or something that might have happened to us in adolescence. We can stay in that place, but transcendence is about moving beyond. So that's a way. And I also think about it in terms of climbing down. Not so much climbing over, climbing down. And I think about, especially in this second half of life, where I built my education, my career, and I've had my family, and I've raised children, and now all that is sort of behind me. So this second half of life, what is the transformation from the first half of life, which has its own demands? And when you get past that, I don't have those demands on my life anymore. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that it happened, but I'm also grateful to be beyond it. So how do I move beyond it? And another word that I like that connects with transcendence is to unbinding. And I think I use that terminology in my story, is how to unbind at this stage in the second half of life, if you will, how to unbind from things like ambition, things like grabbing for a promotion or higher pay or physical things. How do you unbind from that? So I draw that terminology unbinding as sort of related to this movement beyond or transforming or transcending the past. And I think that's just a beautiful summary. How do we transcend the past, the good and the not good? I choose not to want to live in the past, so I strive to live in the present moment, and to let go of things that are no longer life-giving. And I'm sure that challenge will be with me till throughout my life. And it's a challenge that's universal. It's human. We all experience that. And so that's sort of what transcendence means to me in the best way I understand it at this point. But I'll keep thinking about that and contemplating it and seeing what's my definition. Let me keep refining my definition to what that word means. So, but anyway, that's
awesome. That's awesome, and it has been a little funny listening to everybody talk about their meaning, what transcendence means to them. And I think one of the guys even created a new word, so that's all good. Because it is very different. And when I actually started to do these podcasts with all of you, I thought, oh, well, everybody is probably pretty consistent with their meaning, but no, it's not. And so it's fascinating because it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And the one thing that you said today about, the first meaning that you read, to climb over, to climb, to kind of go on the other side. That was, I really love that. I haven't heard that one yet. And I really love that because, yeah, it's not, it's not just going up. Sometimes it's the same place, or it's, it's down. It's just shifting, right? Shifting from one place to another.
And sometimes it's about climbing down. Yeah. Climbing down. It's not so much about grabbing for more. Sometimes it's for grabbing for less.
Yes.
And but I like the word transcendent. It's a word that makes me think, certainly, but it makes people think. What does that really mean? And I mean, it's certainly a valuable progression or maturity progression through life, spiritual maturity, emotional maturity. And it's a good word. Certainly makes me think, and I like words that make me think. So
yeah, me too, and I think it probably will make our readers think as well, which is part of why we're doing this book, right? Yeah. So tell me about you've had a history as a, sorry, I want to call pastor. I'm not sure that's what you tell me. A Catholic deacon. I'm sorry. So tell me about the role of spirituality and transcendence in your mind.
The role of spirituality. Well, I'll try to be somewhat brief and abstract on that question. One is, in my faith and spirituality is that we are born, we are conceived into love by love. And then at the end of our human life, we return to that love. So what happens in between is simply of returning. It's a human journey of returning back from love back to love. And one of the thoughts that as I've thought about this in my own spiritual life, is that the core, what I understand, and I understand this for myself, first, because I'm trying to work out my own life journey, but I think this is universal. This is my sense of it anyway, is that upon our birth, the human condition, or what Christians or Christian theology would say is original sin, is the aspect of losing our true identity. When we go through from childhood, we're learning our identity, but we also grab for things that cause us to lose our sense of true identity in relation to the Creator. So this period of time between conception or birth to our physical death is about recovering our true identity, our sacred identity. our relationship to the creator of heaven and earth. That's this human journey or pathway through, this life that we're in. Mm-hmm. And so it's a spiritual journey that we all experience, because the universal, the mystery of where did our soul exist prior to conception? Where did our soul exist during this human life? And then where does our soul exist after we have exhaled our last breath? That's a universal constant. We were all born, we were all conceived and born, and we will all pass from this human life. And so the spiritual journey is that piece that happens in between these two momentous moments of our human existence. So the spirituality, it's this journey of finding our true identity. And that's sort of points back to the title of my chapter of Recovering Thou, recovering our sacredness. So that's, I guess, in a short/long way of going, trying to respond to the question. But that's my understanding, and that's my spirituality as it is today.
So I love that, and I love it because it, I consider myself to be somewhat spiritual, but I'm also very practical. I'm kind of that solid practical person, and I need to that's how I integrate some different concepts. So what I really like about that, and why these books are part of why these books are so important to me, is that whoever comes in like yourself, you're offering that perspective on spirituality as reflected in us relative to our own personal growth, right? So for me, the concept is using our voice, and but it's all the same. That's what and I get reminded of that all the time, which is beautiful. That whole piece about learning to be ourselves, and whatever that means in terms of our connection to, to spirit or the creator, or whatever we call. It's absolutely beautiful, and it encapsulates for me the healing, right? Our own personal healing, which is what we read about in your chapter, and all the chapters touch on, is that place of healing that then opens up the opportunity for so much more, or as you pointed out a minute ago, maybe less in a good way.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Yeah, very nice. So I wanted to touch on some of your chapter because you have written, and again, this is about your artistic, the way that you are expressing yourself, and I think by which you are encouraging others to express themselves through your own creativity, right? Your own art. So you talked about writing. You talked about we talked about your cover image, and you have many pieces of art as well that people will find really interesting, and we can even put your we will have your Instagram channel, whatever we're calling it these days, your Instagram link in the show notes of today. So there are lots of opportunities for people to learn about their own self-expression. So one of the things, though, that we were looking at in terms of your chapter was the use of poetry, and you have 4 different poems in your chapter. So tell us a little bit about both, the meaning behind the poetry itself, but also the use of that poetry as you didn't just type away a few paragraphs. You have beautiful poetry in there. So talk a little about that, if you will, please.
Well, thank you, Dianna. Poetry is a form of writing that I only began to explore about 3 or 4 years ago. And just a little bit of a backstory, my technical training, my engineering degree, through my engineering degree, I did a lot of technical writing as an engineer, writing procedures and specifications. And in that form of writing, it's about including as much detail as you can. And you need to be specific, you need to be procedural, and you need to give the reader the best technical picture of what the outcome is. And I enjoyed that and did that quite a bit. So that was the background I had. But when it came to writing some of my blogs, and I brought that tendency to use too many words, too long, too many words, and I said, I need to. What can I do to help me exercise myself out of that? And that's where poetry came in, because for me, poetry is about saying the most with the least number of words. And so that was sort of this, when I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to go into the long breath a lot of words to explain it. So let me see how I can say what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing, but use the least number of words. So that was sort of my motivation. And that's where it started. And I found it to be very fruitful, the poetry, because it's not trying to write an essay. It's not trying to write a book. It's not trying to write a chapter. It's just trying to put 1 or 2, 3 words down to whatever I'm feeling or whatever I'm experiencing in that moment. And I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the form. And I was able to bring some of that into my chapter. And there was some good technical reasons for that. One is it changed up the style, the flow of the words and the manner of the words. So the poetry pieces brought in there, but it also allowed me to, each of the poems that I have in there is there's a lot of depth to them. So each line, the poems are very short. They're only 4, 5, 6 lines long, but they're very short, but they have depth. And I'm not sure if folks, as they read it, will really get with the depth. Maybe it will, maybe they won't. Depends on the reader, I suppose. But that's why I brought it in there, and it allows me to say a lot with just a few words. And it's a fruitful spiritual exercise for me, and I'm finding great enjoyment out of that.
So it's a healing process, right? I certainly consider that in terms of the book, just putting words on paper and expressing, what's happening for yourself. So if you're using just the, 6 words for a piece of poetry, that's very powerful.
And I think for me, there's a therapy, there's a catharsis, and there's a therapy aspect to that, because you mentioned earlier, I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren, and they live close. They live, within 5, 10 miles, and I spend a lot of time with them. So, but I do live alone, and I'm very mentally active, creatively active, mentally active. I read a lot, and I process a lot, and the writing aspect, and maybe more so the poetry, is a means for a very single person. When I'm alone, I need to communicate. I need to relate. I need to express. I need to emote. And when you live alone, the options for that. That's why I bring that into words on a piece of paper. And the very act of writing it down is a form of communicating. And fortunately, I'm able to take that one step further. I was able to contribute a chapter to the book. I'm able, I've got a website with my blogs that I started that about 4 years ago. And so that's my way to communicate to others, to process whatever I'm going through, whatever I'm experiencing, the joys and the the angst, if you will, about things that I experience in my life. I'm able to put them down in words, whether it's a piece of paper or whether it's a chapter in the book, or whether it's on the website and via a blog. I have to communicate. I have to open myself and communicate to the world outside of my home. And especially living as a single person. It's very necessary for me. It's very therapeutic at the same time. So, and I think it's also a mechanism or a means for continuing to grow as a human being, doing all that. Now, I do want to mention that the well, I'm so grateful for you and Scott and Laura, and being invited into this book project, because it all happened very serendipitously. As I've shared my story, one of the other writers, I connected with him after 40 years, and he was participating, and he invited me in, and I knew when I got invited in, I had already agreed before I even spoke with Scott. I already registered. I mean, he probably was a bit surprised at that, but the reason I was so sure that I needed to do this is, one is I saw this as an opportunity to sort of as a capstone step or project for me, because I had been blogging for about 4 years, and I started blogging 4 years earlier in what I would call my double divorce event in life, and in that 4 years since, a lot of the emotions, the pain and the grieving of all of that experience 4 years earlier had, because of the writing and because of the art, I was able to wash through a lot of the difficult aspects of that experience, life experience. And so when the invitation for this project came up, I said, this is exactly what I need at this point. It's sort of as this way to wrap up the prior 4 years. And there was a secondary benefit, if you will, that I saw into this is that I knew that the process would be a transcendent process, because it was going to allow me to kind of wrap up and close off the prior 4 years of what I had experienced and was writing and creatively writing about and creatively doing art about. It was going to be that process that will allow me to move beyond or to climb over and to put myself in a new place of having been, I don't want to say healed as a past tense, but I'm ready to move on. And I knew this process would allow me to shift or to write from a little bit of a different vantage point, which is where I wanted to go. And I really feel like this project allowed me to do that, to sort of climb over or to transcend the past 4 years, if you will. So, and even at the end of my chapter, one of the gifts that, as I was writing and drafting and editing and, walking around my house, and a little epiphany came about. And it was that last little piece of wisdom that I needed to close and wrap up the prior 4 years. So this whole writing process has been a gift to me, for sure. And, so I thank you for that. And as well as Scott and Laura and the whole group. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. You know what? That's just food for my heart right there. When I hear about the changes that writers have experienced when they write their chapters and their stories, it really does warm my heart, because it is a very, very powerful process for self-expression. And even though you're not, just by writing your story, you're not necessarily changing your history, you're releasing just some of that angst, some of that baggage, or whatever you care to call it, releasing it in that moment, and then can experience more of what's on the other side, as you said.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I love it. So tell us what your hopes are for this book in the broader sense.
Well, one comment that I would like to make is that the other male authors, when the draft came to us with the kind of the complete design with all the stories, as soon as I got it, I read the entire book, the draft in PDF form, and so much wanted to get to know who or the other guys in the story. And I do want to make a comment. I really, and I say this with complete honesty, is that each of the stories, what I experienced, what I sensed was a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be open and honest. It took me some courage, because the things I write about in the book, you don't know how people are going to receive that, and whether it comes back at you good or not good. Because I write about some very personal things. I really opened myself up, and everybody else in the group did. And I can only be optimistic and positive that level of vulnerability that each of the authors expressed in their stories is going to touch people wherever they are, and whatever story that they read. And that can only be a good and healing thing, not only for the individuals, but for humanity. Maybe it's just a little bit, but if it's a little bit of positive healing opportunity, that would be, I think it's going to happen, and can only feel good about participating with the project on that basis. So
yeah, awesome. I love that, and I'm sure that you remember that that's exactly why these books are in place, because they offer writers the opportunity to for whatever healing or expression that they that they want to manage on one side, and then they offer the reader something too, and that's exactly it. I love that, so I'm right there beside you for sure. Thank you for saying that. So any last things that you'd like to share?
Well, I have, I'll say one thing. The book cover art, there's a page that's devoted to that cover art, and I had a very short haiku poem that I attached to that explanation of the front cover, and maybe I'll just close with that. And I think that's a big story. Big story. So without any explanation to the poem, by the way, I do have I did do a cover. I did print it out, so if you can see that, it's probably not going to be easy to see, but I'll go ahead and just read the haiku that I wrote for that one point. Who are you that screams, I am to be this or that? Beloved enough. We are all beloved enough. And that's what I send out to all the viewers and the readers of the book.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Guy. That was a beautiful way to wrap up. Just lovely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for being here today, taking the time out and sharing about yourself and sharing about the book. It's very, very, very appreciated, and I know that your chapter is going to really, really help readers. Absolutely. So thank you.
Thank you, Dianna. It's a pleasure talking with you.
So listeners, thank you for showing up too. And I'll repeat it might be getting a little boring by now because I've been telling you this for a long time, but I will repeat what I say at the end of every podcast, and that is that just by being here and listening, you are kicking your own ass. You are creating whatever level of awareness you may need in that particular moment. And you have it there to walk forward with or to hang on to. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time. If you like today's podcast, hit subscribe at the bottom on your way out, and come find me at cravemorelife.com for even more DIY ass kicking.